Hello Cardboarders, welcome back. Today I will showcase to you the strongest Pauper deck I have built so far or seen throughout the decades of me playing MTG and Commander. Surprisingly enough, it is mono white, and this is another installment of Think Outside the Deck Box. So these two are our commanders. Let's look at Abdel Adrian, Gorion's Ward, and Far Traveler in a second for 5 mana and 1 white. He's a 4/4, and whenever he enters the battlefield, you exile any number of non-land permanents until he leaves the battlefield again, and then you create X amount of 1/1 white soldier tokens for each permanent you exile this way. So far so good. What do we combine this with? The Far Traveler for 2 and a white. It's a background, and Abdul allows you to have a background as your second commander. And it has your commander creatures have the following effect. At the beginning of your end step, you exile any one tapped creature on the battlefield and return it to the battlefield again. And the idea is to have at the beginning of your end step a tapped Adrian, and then you blink it with Far Traveler, exiling him, returning a bunch of cards back to the battlefield, and then with Adrian you exile all of those cards again and get a whole bunch of soldiers again. But don't worry, the deck does not only revolve around soldiers. They are important in this deck. You are at some point probably trying to win with them, though there are some infinite combos in here. But the main focus and goal, actually, which is also surprising, is to draw a whole bunch of cards when you exile cards from this pile. So we're starting out with the Inspector here for 1, a 1/2, and it gives you a clue. It's a solid card and lets you draw cards over time if you have mana left over. I think I sorted it by mana costs. So we have the Astrolabe next. We are playing some Snowlands here, so we don't have to worry about not being able to cast this one. And when it enters, we draw a card, and the rest is unimportant. So for 1 mana, we draw a card, and the idea is that we have several cards that when we have them enter the battlefield, we draw a card. So we exile this one, and at the beginning of your end step, when he's tapped, we can blink it with Far Traveler, return the Astrolabe back to the battlefield and draw another card, and then exile it again with him returning to the battlefield and create another soldier. And we are playing several of these cards, you'll see in a sec. I also put the expedition map to the card draw pile. There are several important lands in here that we want to fetch with it, and it puts that card into our hand, so it replaces itself, but it will bring the most important lands. You also see, for example, a land that taps our commander, very important. If we can't attack, we have another way, and we have several more ways to tap him, so we are able to blink him every turn, if able. We're playing this good boy here for 2 mana. We draw a card. We can exile the good boy, draw another card when Abdul leaves the battlefield himself by blinking. Energy Refractor draws a card for 2 mana. Rest is unimportant. You get the idea. The Globe, same idea here. You draw a card when it enters, the rest we ignore. Elsewhere Flask. We will probably never use the second ability, it's not important, but the most important part is we draw a card. So you see, we're playing so many cards. This one as well draws a card when it enters. It also stuns a creature for a turn. If it is already tapped, we are able to tap a creature maybe, but yeah, most importantly, we want to draw a card. And the idea is if we have like 2 or 3 or 5 of these cards that draws a card, whenever they enter, we blink Abdul and return those cards back to our hand. We're drawing a whole bunch of cards. This one draws a card when it enters, and when it dies, it most of the time won't die. It's inside Abdul, stuck inside him somewhere in a pocket or so, and when we blink him, we return those. The Egg also, the same thing. You can gain some life by sacrificing it, or gain a certain color if you want, but most of the time, 99% of the time, we want to draw a card. Potion of Healing, same thing. Second thing, we're not gonna activate. Draw a card. Vial, same thing. This one, I guess, a creature not being able to attack or block could be useful. Maybe we want to sacrifice it. Most of the time it's inside Abdul's pockets. Prism, you get it. Supplies, same thing, though it does have a line that allows us to sacrifice it and draw another card. It enters tapped 99% of the time. We're just gonna draw a card by it entering. We are also playing some Universes Beyond cards. Pauper is quite limited and I want to have the best cards possible. Lambus is a card from Lord of the Rings. It draws a card. It also scries before, so that's nice. And I just couldn't resist. It also shuffles itself back into our library. If it actually goes to the graveyard, we can sacrifice it by eating it for 3 life. 99% of the time we want to do the scryings and the drawings. So this one is actually better than most of these cards since it also scries, and we can put some lands on the bottom if we don't need them, or if we have enough card draw cards on the battlefield already, want to scry them down. The scanner here for 3 mana are flying, so that's good for a potential blocker if we want to not exile it into Adrian, but most of the time we want to draw cards and not have it die. Inspiring Overseer, we're going into the life gain category, and boy, this deck can gain a whole bunch of life. You'll see later, we're able to gain so much life with this deck. 100 life points, 200 life points is not hard to achieve with this mono white Pauper deck. Inspiring Overseer gives us a life, draws a card. Same with the Priest here, just the fact that it doesn't fly, so it's a little worse. We have Remember the Fallen. I also put this into the card draw category since it allows us to return 2 of our best creature, 1, and artifact, the 2nd card, from our graveyard back to our hand. So if one of our more important pieces actually fall into our graveyard, we can return it with this card here. Then we are also playing the Torch, which adds the initiative to the game, to the table, and we can go deeper into the Undercity. You can stop the video to see what it all does. The idea is if we blink Abdul often enough and have the Torch enter often enough, we can actually go through the dungeon quite often, and there is a combo, an infinite combo, where we can infinitely look at the top 10 cards and put all the creatures from our deck onto the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters, so that's nice. We can also infinitely drain our opponents, infinitely gain treasures, and so on, infinitely draw cards, infinitely get skeletons. You get the idea. So that's quite powerful. And keep in mind, even if we get hit, we have a whole bunch of soldiers. So most of the time we get like 5 or 10 soldiers with 1 blink, and we have enough blockers. But if the opponent is playing a whole bunch of flyers, we can't really deal that well with flyers, so we'll get the initiative back by blinking the Torch again. And then we're also playing the Monarch here, adding this minigame to the table as well, and we can always be sure that if we blink the Palace Sentinels, we get our crown back to be able at the end of the turn to draw another additional card. Now, on to our second category, which is the removal pile. We're playing the Dawnbringer Cleric, which has a whole bunch of options most of the time. If we don't have to destroy any enchantment, we can just gain some life or actually remove some important cards from our graveyard. So we have a whole bunch of options. Very useful card to be blinked here. Similarly, this good boy, second good boy, is able to destroy all the artifacts and all the enchantments with enough blinks from Adrian here. Very useful card. We're playing the Azorius Arrestor, which detains a creature. I put this into the removal category since it can disable some pesky commanders or useful creatures to opponents or blockers or attackers. We can also detain a Blightsteel Colossus, you name it. Very useful card, and blinked, this can surprise your opponents. Since we can sometimes also blink, we're playing a whole bunch of instant blink cards. We can blink at instant speed and surprise our opponents. Playing Disenchant here, just a solid card. Lapse of Certainty, which is a worse memory lapse, but we're playing Pauper and mono white, and this is a solid counterspell actually. So, and no one will see it coming. Being able to have an option is quite useful. The Gaze of Justice allows us to tap creatures, which is important. We can tap our Abdul, we can also tap our soldiers that Abdul creates and tap 3 of those and then blink them later on. We can also blink the tokens, keep that in mind with Abdul. Blink those and untap them again, since he does not say non-token creatures. And then we exile a creature, it also has flashback, very useful. Unified Strike, we have a whole bunch of soldiers on the battlefield, like 10 at least, maybe even 30. We're starting to win at some point again, but we are able to exile the strongest attacking creature on the board, so this had to be included. The Destroy Evil can either destroy an enchantment or a big creature with high toughness, just a solid removal card in Pauper. And then we're playing a couple of enchantments which we can also blink to remove another creature from the game for as long as they are enchanted, or they have to sack it since we just made it into a treasure, and then we can maybe exile it with the Dawnbringer Cleric who can exile a card from our graveyard. Then we have the Reprobation, which just makes a creature into a 0/1 coward, very useful. If we find a more important threat on the board, we blink it as well and put it onto another creature. Oblivion Ring, as well as the Journey to Nowhere, are just useful cards to either remove a creature or actually any permanent from the game. Blink it if we find a bigger threat on the board. And funnily enough, if we stack it correctly, we can at instant speed also blink those while the target is on the stack and exile the targeted cards forever. Next up, Ramp. Springleaf Drum, simply we can tap our soldiers or Abdul. If we can't attack with Abdul safely, we're gonna tap him and add a mana. This one similarly, it has crew, and so Abdul can go for a ride and tap it for mana. Useful 2 mana rock. Arcane Signet, we all know it, we all love it. Thought Vessel, we are gonna draw a whole bunch of cards here. We already saw the pile of the 20 card draw cards, so we are often discarding cards at the end of turn since we are drawing like at least like 3, 4, 5 cards every turn. And the Thought Vessel is just a useful card to keep those cards. Otherwise, we're just gonna discard some lands. Fellwar Stone, we all know it, all love it. Mind Stone similarly, but we have the option to sack it if we have enough mana out to draw another card. The Pinions, also useful to create a whole bunch of mana and is an important card to keep in mind for our infinite combo later on. Let's put this a little like this so we find it again faster. Playing the Decanter here for another card for infinite hand size and mana rock. This one can actually save us from decking out when we blink it and put some cards from our graveyard under our library, and is a mana rock as well. Another mana rock, we can sack it for a card if we don't need it anymore. Cartographer is a great ramp card if we blink it multiple times and can thin out our deck from basic lands. And this one I also put into the ramp category. I didn't know where else to put it, but this one actually does reanimate a whole bunch of basic lands from our graveyard, since we are gonna discard them if our hand is too full. But obviously if some of our artifacts or enchantments are destroyed, or creatures, if we didn't save them with Abdul, this can also reanimate those. So this is a wonderful recursion card, though quite expensive in regards to mana value. Then let's look at our blink category. We are playing a whole bunch of blink spells. For 3 mana, blink, and we draw a card. Flicker of Fate, these are all instants by the way. We can actually also blink an opponent's creature if we wanted to, but most of the time we are gonna choose Abdul. This one also blinks and I think gives first strike, not that important most of the time. We are playing another Universes Beyond card, another blink, another Ring Tempts You. I don't play with this. Those effects are not important enough in my eyes, but yeah, maybe at some point they will matter, but yeah, most of the times they don't. Then we have the Otherworldly Journey, which actually flickers for a longer time, so until end of turn, keep that in mind. It also adds a +1/+1 counter, not important. Ephemerate, very useful, blinks twice at the beginning of your upkeep again. And then this is our combo piece, which combos with more cards, we'll see in a sec. Just a simple 1 mana blink. And then I said we are gaining so much life, generating so much life, so let's see how. We got the Elder here, which gives us 1 life for each artifact that enters, and we've seen all the artifacts here. These are all gonna be blinked, and we gain a whole bunch of life. This one gives like per blink like at least like 3, 4, 5 life points. Then we have Soul Warden. This one also gives you life for your opponent's artifacts. This one as well, I mean creatures. So this one for your opponent's artifacts, this one also for your opponent's creatures, you gain a life. This one only gives you life for your creatures, and on the back it says when they leave, so if you blink them you gain life at that point, or if they die of course, but that's also good to know that you get life for blinking them. Soul's Attendant similarly, you gain life for creatures. Then lastly we are playing the Searcher Priest, which also gains us life, but also pings our opponents whenever they have a creature enter the battlefield, foiling their maybe token plans that they might have. Now to the protection category, this one is an underplayed enchantment in my eyes, which is the Fanatical Devotion. For 3 you can sacrifice a creature and regenerate a creature. We don't have many regenerate cards these days, but to be able to sack half of your soldiers in response to a board wipe is quite powerful. And yeah, you can also obviously save your commander. This one also we play most of the time to protect our commander from a removal spell. If we don't have a blink spell to save him that way, Prismatic Strands, we can actually save twice some of our creatures or our commander, and we can actually tap a white creature for flashback. Also important to keep that in mind. Standard Bearer is the Pauper version of the Phyrexian creature that for a blue or 2 life can move a target. I forgot the name right now, but I will show it on screen. But this one is very useful and in my eyes should be played more often in commander decks, not only Pauper ones. Ephemeral Shields similarly has Convoke, lets us tap our commander and gives Indestructible, very useful. This one is a fun card to play, no one knows that one, and your opponent skips their combat step. So you imagine you have like 200 life and your opponent is like, yeah, I can deal that. And you ask them to tell you when they want to go into their combat step, and they skip that. Very nice. Gideon's Sacrifice, also similarly, they attack you with 200 damage and you all deal the 200 damage to one of your soldiers, why not? False Hope is a fog in white. It's just there, and if they attack you for 1 turn, they don't deal damage. And lastly, this allows you again to tap your commander, but also tap your soldiers and prevent some damage that might be dealt to some of your creatures, which is also a very nice inclusion in my eyes. Now lastly, before we call it quits here for today, we got the win cons, and the Biblioplex Assistant is one of the most important creatures as soon as we have cards like the Cloud Shift in our hand or in our graveyard, since it can return this card infinitely if we have infinite mana. So, and the idea is with the opinions that we set aside here to have like a infinite mana source and therefore infinite blink combo here. We also need a single card draw card, which is not hard if we have like 20 of these. So let's say this Prism here, and then we can with Abdul out and exile all of these cards. I mean, besides the Cloud Shift, with these 3 exiled, we can actually create a treasure token. With the Pinions, we have a draw card on the stack, but before that we have the assistant who puts the Cloud Shift back onto our library. Then we draw the card, we draw the Cloud Shift again, and we actually have a treasure ready to cast the Cloud Shift again, blink our Abdul, and then we start the cycle all over again. Now, how do we win, you ask? I mean, we infinitely blink, we gain infinite mana, we have infinite enters the battlefield effects, and well, we gain infinite soldiers. They don't have haste, so they could board wipe always, but I mean, it shouldn't be too hard, right? We could create infinite life with this cycle here. With any of these attendants here, we create infinite life. With Oblivion Ring out, we could, for example, infinitely exile all their non-land permanents. That would help. But, and that is what I said earlier, we could also infinitely go into the dungeon. With the initiative, we go into the Undercity deeper and deeper. We could either drain them by 5 life over and over again, but then we are bound at some point to draw ourselves out, which is why this vessel was in here, this one, which can save any of our cards and put it back into our deck, and then we draw 1 card. This one does it multiple times. We always have to make sure that a card goes into our graveyard, which is not hard because most of our card draw rocks can be sacrificed, like the Vial, for example. You see, it's quite a complex combo, but it's quite unique and fun. So you choose your way how you want to end it. At some point, obviously, you're gonna draw a whole bunch of cards from your deck to be sure that you find an infinite combo you like how to end the game. Another way how you can end this game is not with these cards, but with the Marshalling Cry. We have like 100 soldiers out most of the times at some point throughout the game. And being able to give them +1/+1 until end of turn most of the time is actually backbreaking with 100 soldiers. It also has flashback, so we can also give it +2/+2. And with the Biblioplex Assistant, we can return it over and over again if we have infinite mana. If we start also blinking our rocks, that is also a way to do that. One little thing before we go into the lands category is about the life gain, which I also already hinted on. Whenever we blink our commander and we get our soldier tokens, always keep in mind that you also want to blink the tokens as well that you already have on the battlefield if you don't want to attack with them this turn anymore or have already attacked. So for example, you have 30 soldiers on the battlefield, you can exile those 30 soldiers with Abdul again and create 30 soldiers again. So you replace them by exiling them, but you get 30 times 1 life point for those soldiers. This is how this deck generates a whole bunch of life, by always exiling those soldiers again to increase your life total even further. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video so far. Let's look into our last category with the utility lands and lands in general. We already looked at the lands that tap our commander. If we don't have our commander out and really need a white, we have some soldiers probably. We're playing the Ancient Den, which triggers our Leonin here. That gives us another life, so just solid artifact land, I suppose. This one is a card I think should be played more often. It gives you 1 random creature back into your hand. If you only have 1, you get this exact creature. So that's nice. We have some card draw here on our lands by sacrificing them or cycling them with these lands. And then we're playing a whole bunch of snow-covered plains. I actually still have to accumulate a whole bunch of these since these are still normal plains, but most people don't mind if I say these are also snow-covered plains. I just like this artwork and this is why I included them. One last thing before I let you go, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you liked this one, if you wanted to try this out. There is a commander vote in the community tab, and you could be responsible for our next commander showcase video. So do let your voice be heard and choose one of the commander decks ideas you find most interesting and vote for it. Also tell your friends to vote for it. Do subscribe to the channel since I want to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so your help would be much appreciated. Share this video around, tell your friends to also subscribe to this channel. Do check out the original deck, which is inspired by a friend of mine, and I really missed playing against them, and I wanted to build this deck myself. I actually already built this deck for another friend. I don't know if they play still, But yeah, now I have it myself, and it's impressive how consistent and how good it is actually in a normal casual pod, even though it's just Pauper. These two buttons do wonders on the channel, so click this and that one afterwards, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a beautiful day, and bye bye.